thus it came about one bright May morning. I swallowed 4/10 of a gram of mescalin dissolved in half a glass of water and sat down to wait for the results. After a while, I became aware of a slow dance of golden lights.
At 11:40, the first effects of the drug make their appearance. 2 Marines are reported to the troop commander for insubordination, no one realizing that their behavior was due to the first effects of the drug. The drug is also beginning to affect the other men. They no longer take cover, they relax and begin to giggle. Men with no specific task to perform have relapsed into laughter and inconsequential behavior. While these incidents are taking place, the troop commander is still trying to direct the action, in spite of feeling nauseated and being disturbed by the mental effects produced by the drug. But 70 minutes after the administration of the drug, with one man climbing a tree, the troop commander gives up, saying, "I cannot do anything about this. I cannot control the men, and I can take no action myself. I am wiped out as an attacking force." However, after much delay, they all arrived safely at the hospital at 1 o'clock. 2 hours later, at 3 o'clock, the effects of the drug are beginning to wear off. In the hospital ward, some of the men lie on their beds. Most of them are still laughing as they talk about their symptoms and the day's exercise.
I was seeing what Adam had seen on the morning of his creation. The miracle, moment by moment, of naked existence. I looked down by chance and went on passionately staring by choice at my own crossed legs. Those folds in the trousers, what a labyrinth of endlessly significant complexity. This is how one ought to see, how things really are. Now someone produced a phonograph and put a recording on the turntable. The voices were a kind of bridge back to the human world. The uneven phrases of the madrigals pursued their course, never sticking to the same key for 2 bars together. And suddenly, I had an inkling of what it must be like to be mad. I found myself on the brink of panic, disintegrating under pressure of a reality greater than a mind accustomed to the cozy world of symbols could possibly bear. None too soon, I began to return to that reassuring but profoundly unsatisfactory state known as being in one's right mind. The man who comes back through the door in the wall will never be quite the same as the man who went out.
So anyway, that intro was like a little excerpt from Huxley's The Doors of Perception, which is a really great book I recommend to people. It's very short and very easy to get hold of. It's kind of just like his first-hand account of a mescalin, which is like peyote basically, experience he had in the 50s when he was living in LA. We reached out and contacted this early psychoactive substances researcher called Humphrey Osmond. And basically it's just an account of him like in his house in Hollywood, LA, taking that substance, and then they go out for a drive and stuff places, and there's apparently a picture of him like on the Hollywood Hill, like with next to the sign, grinning ear to ear, but I couldn't find it, which was upsetting. But I found that little documentary clip with the voiceover, so I thought I'd add that. But I thought I thought we'd leave this episode open-ended. I'm not sure where we'll go with it, because it's an open-ended question whether like what is a drug exactly is an open-ended question, whether you're talking philosophically or legally. I also think there's lots of questions around the ethics of drugs, whether it's categorically wrong to take them or whether there's some sort of moderation, a la the Greeks basically. And also there's questions about like why people use drugs and what's happened with the recent epidemic people are calling it. Like, is it something to do with the meaning crisis? I don't know. But so just wondering when I said I wanted to do this topic, like what were your thoughts? Like, what are your interests on this subject, Owen?
It's funny because you've gone the other direction to what I immediately thought of, which was that when you mentioned drugs, maybe it's because I'm getting old or something, but I just immediately thought of like the pill and like the opioid epidemic and like and kind of pharmaceutical industries, and I didn't really think of the whole subcultural getting high kind of thing. My mind immediately turned towards that, and also the decline in social capital, I think, is because I'm kind of reading a bit about that at the moment, just in kind of for other reasons. And one of the big factors of the decline of social capital is addiction problems. Kind of failing society or failing civilization is addiction problems. So like that's where my mind went to at first. But I suppose, as I was kind of saying to you earlier off camera, that there's like maybe we could divide between those two categories, like that side and the kind of, transcendental experience, the supernatural kind of experimental drug taking, and then like the kind of daily drug taking.
Sure. There's plenty to say on social capital. I've got loads to talk about with that stuff. I think it's like, to me at least, I don't know what you think about this. I think it's quite obvious that dysfunction is not limited to people who don't have community and that sort of things, but it's quite clear that people who do have those sort of dysfunctions, it helps them to have that sort of community. I mean, the obvious examples are, you have groups like AA, right, or Narcotics Anonymous, and then you also have people who talk about, people who go to something like religion, for example. And if you look at a book like Bowling Alone, which kind of like talks about the decline in communities in America, it almost follows the explosion of drugs in the States. But specifically talking about the United States situation, I mean, looking at the whole pain pill stuff is crazy, because when you dig into it, you realize that in 90s, early 2000s, maybe even a bit earlier, there was obviously pills being put out to people, in the 50s and 60s. You have it's kind of a caricature, but you have like the caricature of the housewife who stays home and takes the pain pills and stuff. But basically, I looked into it. There's this place called the South Florida pain clinic, and they were basically just like a small shop in a strip mall, like one of those like really cheap like frontages in a strip mall. And they had like some doctors in there, but basically they were like, from one of them, they were raking in like 40 million a year. So they made like several branches of this across Florida and like California and stuff. And basically the people who own this pain clinic, what they're calling it, was like they were giving like backhanders to the doctors who were prescribing all these things and pushing people into prescribing them. And again, very similar to what happens with politicians. So these doctors wouldn't be paid directly by these people, but they would be very friendly with them, and they would be invited to go and give speeches to rooms of people. And for some reason, these random doctors would be paid tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for these speeches, which is quite interesting. But then obviously, the pills thing got stamped down on, and people, all of a sudden were cut off from getting very easy prescriptions to these sorts of things. And so, if you're hooked on that stuff, withdrawal from it can literally kill you. So people were turning to street heroin. And then more recently, obviously, fentanyl comes around, and as far as I'm aware, from what I've read and what I've listened to, it's pretty much impossible to find uncut heroin now. So pretty much every time you're going to be getting fentanyl. And then also, there's accounts of people, buying other drugs like cocaine and then being laced with fentanyl, and lots of people dying basically. I've got some charts and maps on that, but I'm just wondering what you think.
Yeah, totally. It's a big, it's a big issue. And the funny thing is, that there was this war on drugs thing which kind of happened, and it wasn't just in America, it was in Europe as well. And it was an excuse basically for police to just arbitrarily stop people and search them. And you know, it didn't do anything, and all we have now is like corporate profiteering from drug addiction. Like that's the only thing that's changed in the past, like 50 years or whatever. Whenever the war on drugs started, you know, from the beginning to the end, it's just like, you know, it's been turned into an industry, and yeah, it's the whole thing is awful, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, on that subject, I think the whole corporatism question is interesting, because one of the arguments kind of against the war on drugs is that, oh, these things should be legalized and people should just be allowed to have free access to them, or allowed to have access through the corporations to what is unadulterated, like the actual drug they're trying to buy, right? But I think there's a deeper issue to that. Like, you know, like any ideology, the libertarian / neoliberal argument for that kind of misses the point that, you know, this is actually I think most of the rising use of drugs and, you know, drug overdoses and these sorts of things are actually linked to the fact that social capital has been collapsing and communities have been collapsing, and people are just reaching for a numbing agent, pretty much, you know.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Reaching for a numbing agent, and like that kind of fits in with what I was saying earlier. Like the change in drug use is kind of gone away from that whole kind of like 60s, 70s subculture where you know you explore the depths of your consciousness, you know, to be a better artist or something, and to like, how do you just like numb the excruciating misery of modern life. Like that's kind of how drug use has changed in the past while. And it's interesting because I don't think younger kids, I mean, I could be wrong, but like, you know, teenagers and people in their 20s today, early 20s, I'm not sure if they take a lot of drugs. I think that they could do, but I definitely feel like the romanticization has gone away around that a little bit since I was a kid anyway. I don't know, could be wrong.
Yeah, and I think also a lot of the drug use, I think for the like kind of hippie times, a lot of the drug use was done by upper and middle class people who probably have the resources to keep up a habit if they want to, even. But, you know, they'd be using maybe like, you know, way to put it, like nicer drugs, you know. But like most, you know, most middle and upper class people don't go straight for smack or crack cocaine, you know.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, spread to different class of people. You know?
It's more a hobby for them, which turns into a problem rather than just being like a pure coping mechanism.
Sure. So I wanted to just show this one, because I think it's very interesting just looking at some of the stats on this. So anyway, these are all just like disorder rates, and it's very clear. So this is amphetamine use, and it's strange to me because lots of people would think like, oh, like if you went to South America or whatever, or, you know, maybe like Africa somewhere, oh, there must be drugs all the time everywhere, you know.
Yeah.
But there's a very obvious, like, I mean, okay, there's most Western countries, right? It's definitely in the Northern Hemisphere, but there's a big red blob. There's a big dark blob in all of these charts. That's amphetamine. Which one's this one? This is cocaine.
It's North America, yeah.
Well, it's not, but yeah, it's North America, but there's a very like standout country. Drug use death rate. So this is death rate. So it's like per capita, basically. It's not just sheer numbers thing. But for all of these categories, it's just really obvious that there's one standout country. And what I find really strange about this is
it's the richest country.
It's the rich. This is the thing, is, you know, it's supposed to, you know, drug use is supposed to correlate with poverty and these sorts of things, apparently. But what's interesting is this is the country that has the military industrial complex. This is the country that staged a worldwide war on drugs. So what the hell has happened? Like, this is the complete opposite of what people were told.
Yeah. And like, look at South America, where all the drugs are supposed to come from.
The other one, you have the other ones, you have like a rate, right? So it's like a rate of
those South Americans are all Puritans. They don't touch this.
Well, this is the thing, and this is the share of the population with drug use disorders, right? So it's around the world. It's kind of what you expect, right? Somewhere between 0 and 1%, right? That would be considered the underclass. It's kind of the dropouts of society. In the US, and this is 2019, so God knows where it is now, but it's like 4%, 4% of the population.
Hmm.
And again, like I said, this is the country that
That's
had
incredible.
a decades long war on drugs, and again, like you were saying, it puts people away for possession and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's insane to me.
Yeah, that is quite a shocking chart, actually. Yeah, as you see it. Because I remember, because there's always a bit of propaganda about this. I remember, like, Vice used to make these documentaries where they'd go to like some town in Russia or Africa, and they'd claim everyone was on heroin like 24/7 and so on.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really fit the statistics, does it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is another thing as well. Is I think that for whatever reason, there are like whether they're good or whether they're functional or not, I don't know. But there are still communities, and like you said about the South Americans being Puritans. I mean, they're still very heavily Catholic. They have these communities, and these things have been completely eroded in the United States, and I would say most of Western Europe. But it seems like in the United States, it's just like, and what I find really interesting about the United States, I'd like to see the difference between the rural areas and the cities as well.
Well, I think that's like painkillers are a big thing apparently in those like post-industrial towns and cities.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And
Whereas,
like I said, someone might have an accident or for whatever reason be able to get a prescription or whatever. And those like opiates, even if they're in pill form, it's heroin. It's heroin in a pill. Like, and then if you get cut off by the doctor, which you either did because they were stamping down on it and realizing that they were getting all these backhanders back in the early 2000s, or whether your leg's fixed now, so you can't have these anymore. People turn to different ways because people get hooked. It doesn't matter if it comes from a doctor or not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's only one country as well that has advertisements for drugs on television.
Oh, I don't know if you've ever like been in the States and turned on the TV and seen these adverts, but like even during like you'd be watching like a news channel like CNN or something, and like every ad break will have some sort of antidepressant medication advert on it, and it's only like 30 seconds long, and then there's like so it's all people like happy in fields and the sunshine and that sort of stuff. There's like a 5-second bit that tells you what it is, and the rest of the advert is that really fast voice saying all like the small print. It's really bizarre.
It's the pursuit of happiness.
Sure.
It's the pharmacological pursuit of happiness, because like that's exactly what these ads, because I've seen the ads, and it's exactly what they show you. They're quite similar to banking advertisements. I don't know if like they have much banking advertisements anymore, but remember back when I was younger, on like regular broadcast television, it would just be like family, sunshine, moderate amount of wealth, not too much wealth, moderate amount of wealth, togetherness, community, and it's just like buy this drug or get a loan from this bank. It wouldn't tell you what, they're selling you this kind of vague image of like life success or the pursuit of happiness, and then they're going, oh, if you want that, sign here. Really manipulative advertising, in my opinion. But it is shocking, because I was in the States once, and I was really shocked by like, because it seems so crass and like in your face, from a European perspective. Like, yeah, there's like there's loads of people are on pain pills and antidepressants, and there's loads of drug problems too. But like, it would just be almost too obnoxious to have it like on an advertisement, where in America it's like, it's just there on an advertisement. Like, what?
I mean, I don't know. Most people, I love Americana, I love Americans, I love all that stuff. But you have to be honest, like the adverts are obnoxious. And then if you've ever sat next to a group of Americans in a restaurant or a public transport, the voices are a few decibels louder than many people would expect, for example. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Matches the people, I would say. Matches the ethnos.
Fair.
So anyway, do you know who Eric Adams is?
No, I never heard of him.
Okay, he is like the new mayor of New York. And I didn't watch all this thing, but I know it's funny. Anyway, I'm going to play it, and I just want to see what you think.
doors from my house, I realize how important my crusade is of removing illegal handguns off the streets of New York. Hi, I'm New York State Senator Eric Adams, and for 22 years I wore a bulletproof vest and stood on the street corners and protected children and families in the city of New York. I'm asking you to join me in this crusade of removing illegal handguns off our streets and out of our homes. Please come and join me inside my house as I show you how simple items such as bamboo paper can be an indicator of marijuana use, or a cut of straw can be an indicator of using cocaine. I will show you how to search a room to ensure that you remove illegal handguns and other contraband from your home. What I would like to show here is to empower parents on how to search a room inside their home. It's imperative that you should know what's inside your household. And no one can state that you can't search a room in your own home. You write the Constitution. There are no First Amendment rights inside your household. It is your obligation and responsibility not only to protect the child that may be using an illegal drug or carrying an illegal gun, but you also have to protect the members of the household, their younger brothers and younger sisters, and the other elder members of the household. So by periodically sending a message to your home that there are no rooms off limits, you don't believe in locked doors, your house is open to inspection by your house and the members of your house. The message is you expect your children to do what's right, but you always have to inspect what you expect. And that's the key to providing some preventive safety. So if you come to a room like this, you can start out, I always recommend to start out in a periodic fashion so you'll be used to going through the room to look at the various items in the room. You can look at a jewelry box. A jewelry box of this nature, maybe a simple jewelry box, but if you look through it closely, you don't know what your child may be hiding. For instance, a gun could be hidden, a small caliber weapon could be hidden inside a jewelry box. Look at the various colognes.
He puts it back in. He puts the gun back in.
Why does he put it back in?
You should always, when your child brings in his popular knapsack with many different locations, look through it to see what exactly is your child carrying in addition to a book.
It's so weird because it feels
something
like
simple
a
as a
parody,
crack
doesn't it?
pipe, a used crack pipe. Could he have
Used
found
crack
it on the
pipe.
street?
There we go.
That's quite possible. But this is a discussion piece where you should start speaking with him to find out what is he doing with it, and the whole use of drugs. This invokes conversations. Look at picture frames and behind them, cameras. Try to determine what's taking place. Behind a picture frame, you can find bullets. What does that mean to find bullets? Does it mean your child is carrying a gun? No. Where there's smoke, there's possible fire. Where there's a bullet, there's possibly a gun. You should engage in the conversation and find out what are they doing with the item, and this empowers the parents. Look at all the items inside the room and feel around and see what's the possibility. Something simple as a baby doll. Could be just a baby doll, but also it could be a place where you can secrete or hide drugs. Run your hands over the pillows and see if you feel anything that's unusual. Like a pillow like this with a button is a perfect invitation to hide something. And I felt something bumpy. I would reach in, see what it is. This one could be hidden inside
another gun.
a pillow, a gun.
As if you
Maybe
laid on that
something
pillow,
that
you
you'll
wouldn't
think
feel like the
that can't be
metal
hidden there, but it can. And what happens not only when the person who is carrying this illegal gun is in possession of it, but also a child that comes into the room and plays on the bed, they find this gun. Let me tell you what a child would do. A child would take this gun, and because the trigger pull is so hard, they normally take the gun and they point it in their direction to pull down on it. So many gun accidents take place merely because the child discovers the gun in the room and believes it's a toy, and they play with the gun. Just look and see what's inside your bookcases. It could be more than just books. Perfect place to hide cocaine or other illegal substances.
That is a huge bag of cocaine.
My message to you, you have an obligation to protect your home. The First Amendment does not apply to the right of parents to go through their homes to remove contraband or any other unsafe item. There are no First Amendment rights in your home. You have a duty and obligation to protect the members of your house.
Okay. Current mayor of New York, guys. The current mayor of New York. What's behind this copy of The Genealogy of Morals by Nietzsche? Boom, a bag of cocaine.
Okay. It seems like a simple school children's backpack, but actually it's a bomb.
Yes. But it's so weird because that's the current mayor of New York, and it seems like a parody, and it's got the weirdest music, but it's the most American thing I've ever seen.
It's weird how like I kind of notice this a little bit about like black reformers is like black social reformers in America. It's like they take the logic of the prison system where like
Yeah,
everything's
you're
about,
right. Yeah,
and they
you're right.
apply it everywhere, and they call that like reform. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a strange way to conceive of like, you know, helping your fellow black citizens. Yeah, it's weird.
But I mean, I don't know, man. Like, if you look at most of the ways that schools, if we're talking about children, that schools are constructed, they usually have those like breeze blocks, right? Especially in the States and stuff. Like, they are constructed in the same way as prisons.
Yeah, fair. They even have
Right.
scanners, don't they? In some urban kind of like low income.
Oh, definitely,
urban
100%.
areas.
Yeah, even in London, they have knife scanners.
Yeah, that's true. That's quite recent, isn't it? It's past 10 years or so,
Sure.
15 years.
Sure. Yeah, which is when the decline has been happening. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I was to hide amphetamines, it would definitely be in a hollowed out copy of Fang Numina by Nick Land. Definitely.
I'd put it in a book no one would fucking read ever. I'd put it in Hegel's Phenomenology.
Okay, I'll
of
just
Spirit.
leave it in
No
my
one's
own
reading
book then. That's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Put it in your own book. I actually remember in school they came into us. We had like police in Ireland come into us and like show us drugs, and it was like quite a parody as well, because like, you know, they hand out like a kind of block of hash or something, or like a bag of coke, and like they hand it out like to, and we all like we all sit in like a circle in the room, you know, it's like
a plastic baggie of flour or something. I'm guessing it wasn't the real thing.
It probably wasn't real. The hash might have been real, but I don't think the coke was real. But, and you know, they just like you just like pass it round. Do you know, like if you bring in like, you know, a fucking caterpillar or like a hedgehog to school,
like show and tell.
Yeah, show and tell. It's like, oh, hand it round. It's like hand round the cocaine or and I don't know what they were trying to, like, were they trying to familiarize us with what it looks like? I don't fucking know. The whole thing was really stupid, and it was quite typical of the time. You're talking like late 2000s, early 2010s kind of era. And yeah, I kind of think there was like, especially that year, like war on terror, war on drugs. You know, there's a lot of like contraband society.
Triggered a deep memory in my brain from secondary school. What year would this have been? This would have been like like mid 2000s. I remember, and I don't know what the impetus. It wasn't like a police visit like your one was. I can't remember the police ever actually coming to our school. They might have done. But what was happening, and I can't. So basically, there was like, they sent some like older students around with a question, like a petition, with a petition. And the petition was just like, this is the most bizarre thing and tells you the most about the southwest of England and what it was like, basically, the weirdest place in the world to be. But basically, this petition went round, and it had, yes, the petition was for, it said to legalize all drugs, basically. It was a petition to legalize all drugs. And basically, these older students went round and they were like asking people to sign it. And I guess like a couple of the students signed it without really looking or whatever, because I don't know if you've ever been handed a petition. I've signed petitions and not looked at them before. But basically, like, and then the next day in the assembly, like, it was like a really stern talking to, like, certain students have signed this petition to call for the legalization of all drugs, and we will be calling them into a special detention later on today to blah, blah, blah. Luckily, I didn't get caught in this entrapment. I don't even know what I would call it. But literally, this actually happened to me in secondary school. The most bizarre thing in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty mental. Yeah. That's entrapment. That's
weird. That's a deep memory I've not thought of for like 10 years.
Well, I'll tell you, I've an even weirder story from my school, because in Ireland, so this is weird from an English perspective, because every year on Guy Fawkes Night you have bonfires and fireworks, and it's very normal. For some reason, Ireland developed this really weird fixation with bonfires and fireworks as if they were like the worst thing ever. And it was funny because
What,
people would just,
Irish people hating explosions and bombs? What are you talking about?
yeah, this is the funny thing, right? Because Guy Fawkes was a Catholic and like the IRA, obviously, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
You know, and it was probably something to do with that. Like it was probably something to do with like we have to reform ourselves, and they got kind of
insensitive to have fireworks. Something like
yeah.
this.
But they used to come into the school when you were a kid and tell you how like dangerous fireworks are, and like give you these horror stories of like someone who blew off their fingers because they used a firework wrong or something. And there was one story where this policewoman said that there was a case of a bunch of young lads having a bonfire, and one guy picked up his younger brother and like did a kind of helicopter spin. Like he grabbed someone by one arm and one leg, and you kind of do spin around circles, like, "Ooh." But he let go at the wrong time, and the kid went into the bonfire. And it was a completely made up, had to be a made up story, like, you know.
Oh, it wasn't. They were just telling you this story.
And yeah, and it's a crazy fucking story, and it's quite, again, like it reminded me of it because of the parody element to it. Like that is something, you know, like that is almost a parody. Like it's so clearly a stupid story, and even if it's true, it's kind of funny. Like terrible if it happened, but it's still quite funny because you take really stupid people, and then you kind of take them as a like pure example of what will happen in every situation. You know, like, you take the stupidest people and go, if you engage with this at all, this will happen. Yeah.
I mean, maybe we'll do like a PSA episode where we find some old PSAs and watch them, because I remember, like, well, this is nothing to do with drugs or anything, but I remember like there being like work safety PSAs they would show us, and they were like so bad, like you said, the most ridiculous like made up situations, right?
Yeah. It's kind
So
of I also think it's a kind of managerial problem because it's just managers have.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, and then again, it's a managerial thing. Is like those. Like the police officers that came to your school to show you the bag of flour and whatever, like they probably know that it's ridiculous and they don't have to do it, but they have like a quota to meet. Like they all have to go and do one assembly in each school or something about this.
Yeah, 100%. And also it's a day off work because you're just basically doing nothing for the day. You're just like talking to kids or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, again, this whole managerial regime. This isn't, again, not limited to drugs. There's so many different things, which has kind of been around maybe since like 80s or 70s, I don't know, but it says it's all like results based, but it's results based on their own like metrics. And the issue is like you have something like the war on drugs, which would be a complete failure, but then they'll have their own metrics for it, right? And say it's a success, but like clearly it's not. And actually, that's an interesting thing I wanted to bring up, because I wanted to get some stats on Portugal, because you know that Portugal, like, kind of basically de jure legalized all drugs in like the early 2000s, right?
Yeah. I remember this being a big thing, you know, in Ireland as well, because people who smoked a lot of weed were saying, "Look at Portugal, everything's brilliant in Portugal." Now I don't know if it is or not. Maybe it's not, but
Well, I did some digging on it for this, because I've heard different things, and I did some digging, and basically I couldn't get a clear answer. I mean, I could have gone with my inclination, which is a lot of people I listen to and a lot of people I read, they're just like, well, the death rates just continued going up in the same way as the rest of Europe. Like the only thing that's gone down is arrests, because you decriminalize something as well. Obviously, like there's not going to be any arrests, right? But you know, it's weird because you do a search on this, and lots of the stat sites and, you know, like certain news sites will say, oh, it's still a problem. There's still like delinquents, and, you know, look, there's still like loads of high death rate and this sort of stuff. But then you look at more liberal websites, and they'll be saying how much of a like success and a paradise it is and this sort of stuff. I couldn't get a clear answer on it, and I didn't want to just go with my like inclination, basically. So
the reason you can't get a clear answer is because there's no actual statistic to evaluate the success or failure of this stuff. This is the problem, like, and because it kind of reminded me.
The actual stats, it looks like the drug deaths have gone up. It looks like the drug overdoses have gone up. But that's one stat. I don't really know what that proves. You know, it's difficult to say.
You're right. Exactly. It's kind of difficult to say, and it's like measuring a society's value by GDP. It's like, okay, there was a time when GDP had something to do with social capital, in the sense of like, are people in some sense healthy, minimally happy? Do people trust each other? Do things function to some extent? GDP doesn't measure that. Like, it can correlate to it. Like, at one point in time, maybe it did. I don't think it does anymore, to be perfectly honest with you. It does, but it doesn't measure it. It just correlates, sort of. So, like, these statistics to do with like, drugs are kind of the same for me. It's like, I don't really know if they really say anything, or they just correlate to something. It's the different things,
I'm very anti-GDP, and this is, I'm woke on GDP basically, and I'll tell you why, right? So let me give you a story, right? So two economists are walking down the road, right? And they see a pile of shit, and one of the economists says to the other one, "Oh, I'll give you $100 if you eat that pile of shit." So one economist, he goes, "All right," then he eats the pile of shit, and he gives him $100, right? And then they walk down the street a little bit more, and they see another pile of shit. And the economist who's got the $100 says to the other economist, "Oh, I'll give you $100 if you eat that pile of shit." So the economist eats the pile of shit, and he gives him $100. And they both say to each other, "Wait a second, we've just both eaten shit for no reason." But the other one says, "Oh, don't worry, it's okay. The GDP is $200."
Yeah, that's a brilliant analogy, because like, it's like,
but it's true. Like, I mean, I've got a bit of knowledge, like a little bit of like knowledge working in the industry basically, but like lots of like the economy is all done in computer systems. It's done by trading algorithms. It's done through futures and this sort of stuff. And a lot of it is just backwards and forwards. It's just like simulated productivity.
Yeah, 100%. Like, this is one of the reasons why I think that financial digital capitalism will ultimately lead to just a kind of declining everything, because because like, compared to like traditional, more bourgeois capitalism or even industrial capitalism, I feel like the economistic statistics, like the way they evaluate, the way they calculate growth, or whatever that means, and economic prosperity and success, I feel like it was at least more, of course it was ideological and so on, but at least it was more in line with like something a little bit more fundamentally attached to like human flourishing or something, right? Where financial digital capitalism is just like a kind of matrix of nonsense, which doesn't actually resonate with like people's actual experience as human beings living a day-to-day life, their health, their relationships, their diet, their sort of happiness, all that kind of shit. Like, it just doesn't correlate anymore.
Yeah, and it's I don't know, it's weird as well, because I think it's like it's a value question as well. Because I mean, let's take one story in terms of like measuring something, right? It's like, well, when people get more calories, their brain size increases and their IQ goes up, right? So therefore, the society that consumes the most calories per person must be the most intelligent society.
Oh, yeah.
It's not true. It's not true at all.
No.
And I don't know, it's just so weird, because as well, I think it's the money thing, at least, is definitely linked to Keynesian economics. And you can see this with the COVID alleviation stuff, because it's very clear that worldwide, and specifically the US, we're economically in a bad way, and it's going to get worse. But basically, because of the absolute fire hose of money that's been pumped into the economy by just printing it basically digitally, like GDP's gone up, and like it looks like there's financial growth, but there isn't. Everyone knows this.
Yeah, like people were posting these memes recently about Biden, and they were like, and they were saying, because people were criticizing, because the whole border problem at the moment in America, with the border of Texas, and extreme levels of immigration coming in, and people were posting memes saying, Biden grew the economy so fast, so quickly, and people were like, how did he do that? He just get a sudden influx of cheap labor, house prices go up, and you kind of give the military industrial complex a boost because of Ukraine. And it's like, we're back on track. It's 2003 again. Everything's going good. It's brilliant.
But I mean, it comes back to social capital, and social capital is connected to the systems of power as well, because they've lost so much capital and so much trust. And basically, people have been saying this for years. Like libertarians have been saying this for a long time. They're right about this. Like it's becoming the printing our way out of things, whether that's money or other things. Just like fiat saying making our way out of decline has been getting weaker and weaker and weaker. You know, like because 2008 crisis, like there was a recovery, but it was like by fiat, it was kind of like false, right? Like the economy was put on life support.
Yes,
The US was
exactly.
on life support.
Yes,
and because of the fact that we initially US went off the gold standard, then the Bretton Woods system where all the money in the world was tied to the US dollar as a reserve currency. Like we're all currently tied to the US economy, whether we like it or not, basically.
Yeah, and like it's not surprising that the drug use has gone up since 2008 because, like, one of the disasters of 2008 wasn't just the recession; it was the mechanisms of maintaining the economy under certain like metric and consumer standards, whilst at the same time not fundamentally fixing anything. Like post 2008, the neoliberal countries got very good at that shit. Like they got very good at like covering up the stink of shit with perfume, basically. In fact, they got very good at it.
I think that's been put on steroids since 2020 as well, because one of the things that is like tangible and real about the way our economy was, even after 2008, is it like the fact that there is infrastructure, like to move people around, this sort of stuff, and the fact that there is infrastructure to have businesses and offices is a very tangible, like actual thing that affects people's lives. But since 2020, and people are barely going into work, or they're working remotely, or they're not working at all, these sorts of things, like usually it's the government, usually it's going to be large corporations. I think these chickens haven't come home to roost yet, but there is a hot potato, which is like commercial real estate and public transport, and also just normal infrastructure like roads and stuff. There is a hot potato that is that, which is a huge amount of investment, huge amount of money, huge amount of upkeep, and is not worth even a fraction of what it was before 2020, basically now.
Oh, like, wow. Factually. Oh, so like just general infrastructure is just broken down. Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's broken. I don't say it's like broken, but I'm saying
it's decreased. Yeah.
In terms of like, well, I mean, like, do you think the rail companies are making more or less? Much less.
Oh,
do you think
okay.
People are renting offices anymore?
Yeah.
Do you think it's even worth like, having the number of motorways we have now? Like people aren't even going anywhere. People what you were saying is really true. Like people are in the pod ontologically and economically.
I was just going to tie the drug thing into the pod because like there's
that's how you entertain yourself in the pod is you drink and you take drugs, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's like there is something about drug taking which is very much like I'll just sort of retreat into myself. I'll like sort of take something that makes myself feel good, and then this is a very kind of Adam Curtis point I'm going to make now. It's kind of like I'm just going to retreat into myself and take these drugs like myself, and I am the pod. I am this like center of warmth and fantasy, and everything around me in the external world, it doesn't matter anymore because because that's what drugs do in a way. They sort of facilitate you to feel a way which is not in line with the kind of reality of the external world around you.
Yeah.
Therefore, and actually Freud, to make it kind of psychoanalytical, Freud talked about the reality principle, and I'm not going to pretend I understand 100% what he meant by that because I'm not like an expert on Freud or anything, but he said that the reality principle happens because it's an external intrusion, like it's an external input onto you. So the kind of pod architecture, the drug architecture, or the drug kind of pharmaceutical chemical management, it's very much a kind of retreat into the self. And like the external worlds can just go away because it's kind of, as you were saying earlier, the communities are breaking down, society is breaking down, the kind of the purpose of living is breaking down, the relationships breaking down, whatever. And yeah, it's just a retreat. So it is like when I say pod, that's what I mean by pod. Like I don't mean like just literally like a physical space. Like the space is a kind of is an existential disposition which relates to like an inside and an outside. So so that's a good reference.
So I did a bit of reading on this, and obviously because of time, because pharmaceuticals are kind of a more recent development generally. I mean, you mentioned Freud; he was a cokehead, but lots of philosophers like talk about alcohol. Obviously, I mean, we could talk about the symposium, which is just like the ancients getting drunk together and talking philosophy, which is pretty cool. But on the topic that you were saying of social withdrawal and the pod in general, I found like Kant. So from Kant, I thought that he would be just like morally and ethically categorically against like all sorts of intoxication. But what's interesting, I found this excerpt from I've taken a little bit out of this just kind of to make it more relevant. But this is from his Anthropology from a pragmatic point of view. So this is Kant. Drunkenness is the unnatural condition of inability to order one's sense representations according to laws of experience. Wine, which merely stimulates, and beer, which is more nourishing and satisfying, like a food, serve as a social intoxication. But the difference that drinking bouts with beer make guests more dreamy and withdrawn, whereas at wine party, the guests are cheerful, boisterous, talkative, and witty. All silent intoxication has something shameful in it. That is intoxication that does not enliven sociability and the resounding communication of thoughts, of which opium and brandy are examples. So I thought that was really interesting, and it almost puts him almost in like the same space as Hume, where Hume would say you defer to the common life, right? You defer to those sorts of things. And obviously he's talking like opiates existed then because he's talking about opium, right? And he's saying how those are socially withdrawn, and he's saying that that's kind of his bad side of things. So it's interesting. I don't know. I feel like, Kant would agree with the negatives of the pod in that respect. I don't know what do you think about that?
I think I agree with Kant on that. That's actually surprising. I didn't think
it's not what I expected from him. Honestly, it's not what I expected from him.
But I think generally, there is a kind of sociability to philosophy, inevitably, because you do get since
I would say it depends on the philosophy and the philosopher, but yeah.
Fair, okay, fair. But even if you go back to the ancient Greeks, and as you were saying in the Symposium, there's a kind of Dionysian element to philosophy. I do think philosophy is quite Apollonian for the most part, but I do think there's definitely a Dionysian element to it where it wants to get lost in this kind of interplay of kind of emotions and thoughts and see where it leads. I mean, it's always been a disciplined interplay, but it's definitely an interplay. If for example, one of the best dialogues ever really is Phaedrus, which is Socrates talking about giving his explanation of the soul as a chariot, and it's very much in favor of getting kind of lost in other people, in exchange of which is a very modern word to say exchange, but you know what I mean, in the discourse, to get lost in the discourse a little bit, and in quite an embodied sense as well, because there's a lot of references to the body in Plato's dialogues as well, which people kind of don't know what to make of. Some people just say he was gay, and some people just say, well, not him, but people say all the Greeks were gay. And I don't think that's true. I think it's something, I think their relationship to the body and philosophy was just more complicated and more interlinked than modern philosophy. But
yeah, they're saying all kinds of crazy stuff. They're saying the Anglos were trans and all this sort of stuff these days. I mean, they're just trying to fit it into their ideological box. It doesn't really.
Yeah, but
I think that the Greeks were just comfortable with their sexuality. That's what I think.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of opinions on this, but I won't get into it because it'll take me so long to explain. But there's definitely the point about social withdrawal is basically there's something about philosophy which is kind of brings you out of social withdrawal, but at the same time, I'm not sure, because then if you look at the cave analogy, you think well, you're detaching yourself from the group and you're going off.
Yeah, this is the thing. Using opiates I mean, as far as I'm aware, I'm not really like versed in it, but as far as I'm aware, they are like socially withdrawing, and
Oh, okay,
and
yeah.
also something like it's weird. It's not the specific drug that does it. It's almost for Kant here, and I think I would agree with him. It's almost like the context that changes what it is. Like like sneaking off and taking heroin, but also like drinking alone, for example. They both have that same sort of withdrawal to them, And there is kind of
Yeah,
something
yeah.
really shameful about that, It doesn't really serve a purpose. It's just stupefaction of the self. It's almost like it's kind of like drinking alone, but drinking in a group is kind of like what masturbation is to sex.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. Yeah. There does seem to be an ethical division based on withdrawal. I'm even thinking of like when I was younger, and like people would have a lot of weed around, and some people, you'd be at a party or whatever, you'd be drinking some beers, and some people want to go out maybe to another party or to the pub, and some people would just want to sit there all night smoking weed. And
Yeah.
Sometimes the weed is kind of almost brought out as in a way to get people to just sit there all night watching TV. Where I was like, okay, I have a bit if it enlivens my evening and I can, you know what I mean? I think sort of makes things more interesting and whatever in a kind of social sense. But if it's gonna withdraw me into, watching fucking YouTube videos all night, then I'm not really that interested because that's just depressing.
Yeah.
So definitely,
And
definitely. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I actually did want to talk. I wanted to talk about weed because I think something really strange has happened with that. Because again, I kind of agree with what you're saying. Like, it can be innocuous, like alcohol can be, but it can also. I do think the extent to which it can cause someone to be completely withdrawn. It can also, in the same way alcohol can, it can stupefy it can kill brain cells, it can kill brain activity, but also it can cause mental disorders. I honestly think it can cause psychosis. It's very clear that it can.
There,
One of the
recent
psyops that
studies have
happened
showed that.
Exactly, yeah, and it's one of the psyops that's happened, I think, unfortunately, through the whole Joe Rogan kind of thing. Is like people think it's this sort of wonder drug that cures cancer and does all this sort of stuff, and you can tell there's something more addicting and consuming about it, because I've found that proper weed heads get the most aggressive and most defensive when you start criticizing this sort of stuff.
Well, the craziest I've seen any friends get, and actually violent get, is been from weed as well, not alcohol. Interestingly enough, yeah. Like most of the time, it makes you. See, just the thing about weed is that it makes you paranoid enough that you avoid conflict. But if you have, for example, other drugs or alcohol mixed in, which make that paranoia like less paranoia can kind of cripple you and you want to run away and like hide on your own. But if the paranoia isn't, if it's not just weed and people are feeling more confident or something, then that paranoia can turn into open displays of just fucking aggression. So
and also it's very this is a very controversial thing, but it seems to be pretty clear that a lot of the like mass shooters and mass violent crimes and stuff, especially stabbings in London, lots of these people, they seem to have a history of mental health issues, and a history, like lots of them have a history of prolonged marijuana use or synthetic cannabinoids use as well. And this is this is the thing, right? I don't think getting absolutely trolleyed off alcohol for one night is an issue. It's that consistent and prolonged use that causes issues. That's when you become an alcoholic. That's when you become a weed head. That's when it's going to like actually have serious long-term effects on your body, I think. And that's clear. I think that's clear for any drug. We're idiots if we're going to. It's just like it reminds me of vaping, when vaping first came out, and they're like, "Oh my god, we've solved the problem of smoking. This is amazing. It's just vapor. It does not do any damage to you, but it's coming out that actually does cause issues for your lungs and stuff." It's just we're idiots. It's an element of human hubris to think that we can put safety rails on everything. It's kind of like, it's very similar to what Zizek was saying about, we want the beer without the alcohol, but
beer without the alcohol.
It's just human hubris. There are problems in this world, and we have to be cognizant of them, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I also think the thing about weed though is that it this is one of the points that Zizek makes about weed. He says that weed is presented as if it's this drug that has no side effects or has no ill health problems. So it is this beer without alcohol, but at the same time, the side effect, as you were saying, is people's mental health. So actually, I think one of the reasons weed is attractive to so many people is because it makes things like overly stimulating and overly interesting. So if you don't find anything interesting, you're not interested in anything, you don't have a passion for anything, you don't really, like kind of life is basically just dull for you, and you smoke a bunch of weed, you can kind of watch like a stupid television show, and all of a sudden it's just like incredibly overwhelming. And that's what I never liked about it, is just like it makes everything equally stimulating and interesting. I like hierarchy. I like structure. You know what I mean? I don't like that. Everything's interesting. I fuck off. I don't want everything to be interesting.
I don't think that's unique to weed as well. I think that's you can get the same effect with a depressant. I mean, this is just me reflecting on my own experiences that through like the use of alcohol, like I could enjoy or think I was enjoying a conversation or enjoy a time at a pub. You meet people through work and all this sort of stuff, and you think you're having, or you can like put up with people. Everything is interesting when you're drunk. Everything's just engaging and interesting when you're drunk, even though it's depressant. It has a similar effect. And then I started going through these periods of when I didn't want to drink or was being sober and stuff, and I realized that I don't really like any of these people. I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I think you can get that effect from like anything that's psychoactive, which people don't realize this, but alcohol is as well. It is psychoactive.
Fair. Yeah, no, I think that's true. If because you can misuse it in order to put up with shit rather than use it to lubricate,
enhance a time that would basically my metric for it would from now on, like from that I've been using recently, is that would this still be a good time if there wasn't any intoxicants around?
And ironically, if you say yes, that means okay, have a drink. Yeah,
it's weird. It's very strange.
It's paradoxical because you think it'd be the other way around. You think it'd be like, well, yes, so what's the point in drinking? But actually, it's yes, so just have a drink. It's fine. Whereas
I never thought I'd say this, but I actually agree with Kant on this. It's crazy. I never thought.
Yeah, I do. I think that sociability thing is like a really good.
It's a good metric, I think.
Metric for if it's use or misuse. 100%. I think that's really good. And like, because as well, like people have been consuming alcohol for thousands and thousands of years. And I think anything people have been doing for that long is just it can't be just 100% bad,
Maybe with alcohol is a very interesting one, because I mean, like most people say, and I think maybe this would be true, is that if it was never like found and then it was invented today or something, that it would be the most like would be banned instantly. Because to be frank with you, and I don't know whether this is to do with the fact that it's legal and accepted in most places of the world, but like it is a massive killer. It's a massive killer of people, and it's something.
When you say killer, do you mean like people do stupid shit when they're drunk, they drive, or like do you mean like the actual alcohol?
The actual alcohol, because the thing is, it is a very high. I didn't actually find anything on this specifically, but I know that it's a very high rate of like deaths from maybe not just someone like an alcoholic who dies of chronic liver failure, but it's associated to. It's a health issue that's associated with constant and prolonged alcohol use.
Okay.
It's a huge issue. And it's one of those things people do say, like, if it was discovered today, it'd be banned immediately. And then there's also like knock-on effects where, apparently there's something like 1% of most Western countries' GDP is taken away by the effects of alcohol, pretty much. Like whether that's an issue, we spoke about GDP, but I just think it, it's obviously.
I think the Guinness factory in Dublin would beg to differ.
Right, maybe. Well, maybe. Yeah.
that's like 5% of our GDP.
An argument as well that people think that the reason the West was so successful might be down to alcohol as well.
I've seen memes about that. It's like weed civilizations versus alcohol civilizations. And alcohol civilizations are basically the Faustian ones. you know?
Yeah. But I mean, it's just a lot of things about alcohol are very strange because it's almost like a benzodiazepine, a opiate, and a stimulant, like all rolled into one, pretty much. And like even compared to stuff like heroin and whatever, like alcohol withdrawal, if you're an alcoholic, has a higher like death rate than any other drug.
Oh, withdrawal. So you're okay, yeah. Because I actually have a relative that was alcoholic, and he
Yeah.
like, he was very active, and then when he got off it because he went to rehab, like Jesus Christ, like he just went, like his health went. I mean, his mental health was improved 100%, but his physical health just went down out the fucking window
Yeah.
very quickly. And that was weird. And like I remember at the time, like family members talking about this and going, "Oh, that was weird." But apparently, it's like a thing where, if you, yeah, like your body becomes so dependent on the alcohol that it doesn't know how to function without it or something like that. It's
Yes, and it changes the way your brain chemistry works. If it's over a prolonged period of time, your brain, there's this thing called gabapentin, and it's the chemical that your neurons use to kind of soothe stimulus so that you're not completely overwhelmed by all the sensory input of the world, pretty much. And basically, your body gets used to having the depressant effect of alcohol over time and stops producing it.
okay. Yeah. It's like
So you suffer from stuff like insomnia, but you're still tired and all these sorts of things if you go off it quickly. But basically, like if you enter delirium from that state, which is your brain is just so overwhelmed, that it's got like a 5 to 35% death rate with if you don't get any treatment, which is usually they give you benzos and stuff, but it can be even like 5% even if you do get treatment. It's got a huge death rate. And if you go off heroin, yeah, you're gonna feel shit for 2 weeks, but you just feel shit for 2 weeks.
wow. Okay. Well, I didn't know that.
And lots of people don't know this, but it's just completely accepted, you know.
So so the chemical in your brain, it helps what, not be overstimulated by things, you were saying?
Yeah, it's like your brain's like soothing agent. It like makes sure that your neurons aren't constantly firing. Basically, that's my understanding of it.
Kind of makes sense because I feel like with alcohol, it does turn off a lot of the.
It's a depressant. Yeah, it's a depressant. Yeah.
It turns off it's the stimulation. Yeah.
Yeah, because it lowers your anxiety, right?
Well, like that's why it's so dangerous to drink drive. It's because it lowers your reaction time because you're not stimulated by everything. Like a little thing that happens in the corner of your eye when you're sober, what's that? Doesn't happen when you're drunk. You just don't notice it. And it's also why people get like often die or get seriously injured in fist fights when they're drunk. But that never happens with people when they're sober. It's because your reaction times are fucked. Because if you're drunk and someone like sucker punches you from the side and you fall and you don't put your hands up and hit your head, like that just wouldn't happen when you're sober, because unless you're very old or something, because your kind of instinctual reaction times are firing the whole time, and then therefore you'd move or you'd put your hands up to protect your head or something. It doesn't happen when you're drunk.
This is why alcoholics shake when they sober up, because their central nervous system has been repressed for so long that when that depressant is stopped being administered regularly, your brain is just firing all the time and inconsistently as well. It's not a control. It's your central nervous system is just completely effed.
Fucking hell, this is ruining my pint.
Right, man. But it's true, unfortunately. But I feel like maybe most people can handle their booze, but I do think it's a bigger problem than we give it credit for, basically.
Yeah. Well,
do you want to hear Nietzsche on alcohol? I think.
Yeah. Give me Nietzsche. Yeah.
Okay, so this is from Twilight of the Idols, and this is aiming at the Germans here, but I think it's kind of true of most Western European countries. I
think I've read this passage. Yeah.
Oh, you definitely read this. You definitely read this.
Yeah,
this is very common, but so this is kind of again paraphrased like the Kant part, just to get the most interesting parts. But who has not pondered sadly over what the German spirit could be? But this nation has deliberately made itself stupid. For practically 1,000 years, nowhere else are two great European narcotics, alcohol and Christianity. How could it possibly happen that young men who dedicate their existence to the most spirited goals lack all sense of the first instinct of spirituality, the spirit's instinct for self-preservation, and drink beer? The alcoholism of scholarly youth perhaps does not constitute a question mark in regards to their erudition. One can be even a great scholar without possessing any spirit at all. I like that last sentence as well. It reminds me of Joshua Hansen, what he's been working on.
Yeah. You could be a scholar without any spirit. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
It's funny because
But this is kind of like, again, like I said, like I was just dropping a bunch of like alcohol knowledge that isn't widespread, as widespread as alcohol itself, you know. But I kind of agree with Nietzsche here. Like, I wonder, like, again, there's the arguments that maybe alcohol had a positive effect on European culture. But imagine what the European spirit would be if we didn't have this. Maybe it's a handicap. I don't know. Like,
well, he talks about Germany. He talks about Germany. Ireland's a really good example. Like, if famously alcoholic country did never.
Well, and again, the other narcotic that Nietzsche took aim at, Christianity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But like, I find it very interesting here how Nietzsche, who dedicated basically most of his work to critiquing Christianity, puts alcohol on the same level.
Yeah, I mean, like, and as well, like, Nietzsche's kind of known as a Dionysian figure, and here that seems to be a little bit.
Yeah.
But then again, Alexander the Great was sort of known to be a bit of an alcoholic. That could be propaganda, that could be bullshit. You never know. I mean, there's no way to really know these things. But if that's true, that's sort of strange. Like the almost a Nietzschean ideal was an alcoholic. So there's a kind of, so who knows? There's a kind of contradiction there. I'm not sure. I suppose again, it's the way you use it. It's the way it's what you use the thing for. And if you use it for something.
Sure. Yeah,
badly.
We can come back to the more moderate kind of views of Kant, which I wouldn't expect from Kant, but there you go.
Yeah, like I would have thought Nietzsche would be in the other category, and Kant would have been in the kind of more morally, rejecting it kind of category. So that's interesting. But no, there's definitely like one of the things that annoys me from an Irish perspective is like it's partly to do with the fact that you live on an island and you had like literally the best naval power in the world. I mean, other than the Americans today, but like until the Americans, you had like the best naval power in the world right next door to you. So it kind of stops you exploring a lot. But like, I just have a feeling that like, I don't even know if people tried. I don't know. People were like, I wonder what's over there. I wonder if we'll get in a boat and go over to Iceland and see what that's about, or like go down to Africa and see what, because like all the other European nations.
You are kind of right, but I mean, England wasn't, didn't really kick off until like the end of the Elizabethan era. So you've only got so much of it.
Yeah,
you have thousands of years before that of not doing much and just
and it's just like, come on, guys. Why wasn't anyone curious? So like maybe alcohol plays a role, because again, it like you kind of withdraw into a kind of overly stimulated or understimulated chemical experience, and then all of a sudden, the rest of the world is not interesting to you anymore. You don't need to go explore it.
It might be a question of like individual or ethnic constitution, because like you said, maybe the Greeks and the Romans just become Faustian when they drink, but maybe the Irish don't, or something. I don't know. I wouldn't know. It's one of those things that we'll never know, I think, probably. I don't know. But I just wanted to bring up the Dionysian thing really quick, because I mean, obviously, like on the face value, like the Dionysus is the god of intoxication and wine and these sorts of things. But I don't think we should take, I mean, even the actual Dionysian cult, I don't think we should take that literally. And especially, I don't think we should take Nietzsche's conception of Dionysianism as like literal, let's get drunk and that sort of stuff. I think it's more of a spiritual or like intellectual drunkenness and freedom and play. I don't think it should be taken so literally. And I think that's particularly true for Nietzsche. And I come to that conclusion after I'm pretty well read on Nietzsche, so I'm pretty confident in that.
Yeah, fair. I would agree with you. But I just think, I don't know. I guess I just have a little bit more of a slightly more optimistic view of alcohol. I think it's sort of a natural disposition, I think. I mean, like you even see animals fucking eating fermented apples and shit and having a bit of run around like cows and buffaloes or whatever.
I wouldn't say I've got a negative view of it. I think I've got a real what I've been saying is just the facts of the matter, and I don't think we should fall afoul of the naturalistic fallacy and say that because animals do it, it's okay or something like this.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying therefore it's okay. Because humans are never just in the same natural life disposition that other animals are. But I actually think urbanization is a huge part of it. I think that so for example, peasants often would drink very, very weak ale. Like ale, when we talk about, when we watch Game of Thrones, right? Like, have an ale. That's not what am I drinking now? I'm drinking a can of Heineken, and that's like that's 4.5%. That's nearly 4.5%. I think now I'm not an expert on fucking alcohol, but I think the ale that they would drink, that originally they used fermentation to keep it better because they didn't have running water. So to go to the well to get proper running water, you didn't make a trip to the well every day. You know what I mean? Like this was not as it wasn't a case of turning your tap on. Like getting water wasn't that simple back in the day, and fermentation was a mechanism of keeping parasites and bacteria out of the water. It would last longer. So it was very weakly alcoholized. So I think ale was like 1% or something.
It's like between 1 and 2.5% generally, I think.
Yeah, and I think that
what we've got now is an industrial system where, you can literally just go and buy as many pretty much as many cans of Heineken as you want.
Yeah, no,
and for them, even when they would distill, if they distilled something, they would only have a limited supply for a short amount of time. Like in modern society, you have the ability to get consistently drunk, basically.
Yeah, and also medieval times and before medieval times, yes, there were cities, but most people were outside all fucking day. And if you've ever drank and been outside all day and you're getting lots of fresh air and you're moving around, you're getting exercise, especially if you're drinking weak beer or ale, it's not the same thing as if you're in a flat and you're getting hammered, smacking down fucking tequilas or something. You know what I mean?
Well, and it comes back to the social and the withdrawal thing as well. You have the ability now to isolate yourself and get away from any sort of social judgment or any of these sort of things. And in regards in comparison to purchasing power, it's incredibly cheap to buy alcohol, even with all the state taxes and these sorts of things. In comparison to what little or any purchasing power the average person would have had throughout history, pretty much.
Yes, and actually, now that we've talked about the urbanization thing, it reminds me of something I wanted to bring up earlier, forgot to bring up, which is alcohol and war, because it was common, is what I've heard. It was common to have a small amount, some amount of alcohol with people in war, because obviously.
Oh yeah, if I was in an ancient war, it's definitely what I'd want before I go to the front.
But the thing is, again, you're outside the whole time, you're moving around, it's lots of exercise. You're not getting this doesn't mean people were drunk, because again, we sit inside, we don't move, we sit in a pub and we get drunk. We're not moving, we're not outside, we're not getting air, we're not getting exercise. It's just, but they wouldn't have been getting drunk, but they would have used it just to simmer the nerves.
Yeah, Dutch courage, right? I would definitely want that if I was going up against a bunch of spears.
I mean, yeah, obviously, and that's a history book that has, as far as I know, I'm sure some scholars have written a little bit about this, but because war is bad and we can never talk about it, there's very little written. There's very little written about this kind of stuff. So that's a history that has not been written yet. It's the relationship between war and alcohol. Because if you're talking about then dealing with overstimulation, then that fits into war, but it also fits into urban life, because urban life is fucking overstimulating.
Yeah. And
not
you've got
with fear,
huge
but
connection as well between medicine and alcohol, especially, as use as an anesthetic, and then also as antibacterial as well. It would have been used, but anesthetic it was used. I mean, obviously they wanted to get rid of it later on because alcohol increases the blood flow. But if you were getting a leg amputated, especially in Victorian, probably earlier actually, England or something, people would often get really drunk beforehand. So, having a leg cut off wouldn't feel so bad. But yeah. There's a book to be written there, I think. There's a book to be written there.
100%. I'm sure there's someone who's written a little bit on this, but it's not. I don't think it's a very well explored area.
No. Anyway, I was thinking that we were going to conclude there, but I've got one more clip, unless you've got something else to add.
No, play the clip. I can't think of
Okay.
anything.
This is, I think it's in Minnesota, but there are some cops, practicing their new drug testing tubes.
That's a new drug detecting test that Minnesota law enforcement could ask a driver to take.
Drug impaired driving.
Why are everything is parody with these people?
I know, it's weird,
Drug
isn't it?
detecting test that Minnesota law enforcement could ask a driver to take.
Drug impaired driving.
I thought the COVID tests were like demeaning enough, but now if you get pulled over, you're gonna have to deep throat a bit of plastic for a while.
Fucking hell. Yeah. That's pretty humiliating.